All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
In the heart of the night, where the shadows play, on the X Zone we gather, come what may, with Rob McConnell guiding us through the dark, searching for truth hidden, igniting the spark. Whispers of spirits, both gentle and bold, tales of the ancients in the stories retold, from haunted old houses to the echoing halls, we seek the unknown where mystery calls. On the X-Zone Radio, where the truth finds a way through the stories of ghosts that wander and sway, inviting the seekers, the wise and the brave.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. For the next 3 hours, I'm your host and your guide, as together we will cross the time-space continuum to this place that, well, I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe, dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until 1 a.m., right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network and all our affiliates across Canada, the United States, and Europe. And we're also on Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and locally on our favorite AM radio station, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, just down the street from us here in St. Catharines. And they stream us around the world on classic1220.ca. My guest this hour is Humphries, Phil Humphries. And he's got quite an impressive resume. This is one of the very few times where we've actually received a resume from a talent agency. So let's bring Phil in to talk to him. We've had the pleasure of having Phil on the show before. And Phil, welcome back to the show. How have you been?
Thank you. I've been great.
Are you still going out there and doing your stand-up comedian stuff?
I took a little step back from the stand-up to focus on auditioning for voiceovers and commercials and so on. 99% of the stuff my agent sends me are television commercials, digital commercials, occasionally a motion picture, and occasionally a TV series. But, you know, I'm not an anybody yet, so the chances of getting one of those are slim. So I focus on TV commercials and voiceovers.
What TV commercials have you done? Anything that we've seen up here?
Nope. I auditioned for a number of them. I have not been selected yet to actually perform any.
Oh, it's too bad. Well, I wish you continued success on it, and one day we'll see you up here.
I hope so.
Phil, tell us a little bit about yourself for the listeners and viewers who weren't with us last time you were on the show. Who is Phil Humphries? Well,
Phil Humphries is right now an actor, comedian, and voice talent. Prior to that, though, a long time ago, I was a police officer for about 20 years, served in 2 branches of the U.S. military, and then ended up at CIA, which I stayed as a career. At CIA, I traveled all around the world and worked with all kinds of very interesting people and had the adventure of a lifetime.
These are very trying times for the United States. You know, we have things going on in Iran. And first of all, thank you very much for your service, both in the military and as a law enforcement officer. As a former member of the military and CIA, how do you see the war in Iran going on? Tomorrow night there's going to be a big address from the White House, President Trump was saying today. And what are your opinions on what's going on?
If I could have actually have seen the intelligence package, to understand, whether there was an imminent threat of the Iranians putting a working nuke on one of their longer range missiles and lobbing it off towards the west. I would have a better feeling for it. Obviously, being retired CIA officer, I no longer have that type of access. So it's hard for me to offer an opinion. The president could be right. Maybe he's not. I would have no way of knowing. One thing I learned in law enforcement and carried through into intelligence was you go on what the facts are.
Right.
I don't have access to the facts. So, I'd just be blathering if I offered an opinion.
So how did you go from law enforcement into the world of intelligence?
Well, it was kind of a two-step process. In law enforcement, I was assigned at one point not only as a major crimes detective with a multi-jurisdictional unit, but I was also assigned as an undercover drug detective with a DEA-funded multi-jurisdictional drug task force where I traveled, different states, and I flew, aviation stuff, and that kind of brought me into that spooky world. And then when I applied CIA on a lark, basically, towards the end of my police career, that combination of things in combination with my military, which was in intelligence, they selected me. And that's kind of how I got there.
In your opinion, is the crisis of fentanyl all it's built up to be by the media as well as the members of the administration?
When I was a crime analyst, the last portion that I had within the actual police community, fentanyl was a big deal. It was dangerous, and it was dangerous to the officers. If they stopped a vehicle and they weren't careful on how they were handling evidence and contraband, and it happened to be fentanyl, we had one officer completely incapacitated. And it was only because of the rapid response of emergency personnel that it was a she that she survived. So yeah, it is incredibly dangerous. How much of it is flooding into the U.S. or has flooded in, I have no idea. I've been out of the drug enforcement business for a long time. Back in my day, I'd never heard of fentanyl.
Right.
It was cocaine and heroin and, that sort of thing. I think that it's, for anyone that sticks a needle in their arm, fentanyl is a huge danger because it'll kill you dead.
There's no coming back from the dead, is there?
Not as far as we know, but maybe someday on your show.
Well, yeah, we do have those people on.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. All right, so you went from law enforcement into the intelligence world with the CIA, and now you're in comedy. How did that transition happen? Like, I can understand the, from law enforcement to the CIA. And how did you get into the comedy? Like that. That's quite a leap.
It is. One thing I always tried to keep in mind, and much wiser officers than me trained me, was that you had to, in order to deal with anything government, you had to have a great sense of humor. And so, from being a former police officer, the absurdities that you're going to run across, not just on the street, but with government itself. Right. And, a lot of absurdities occur in government. And I'm not a fan of politicians, never have been since I was a young street cop, and I'm still not today. I wasn't when I was at CIA, and I wasn't when I was in the military. They're not my kind of people. My kind of people are the boots on the ground folks that politicians make a decision and they get sent off to get shot at or to enforce something or whatever it happens to be.
Where does your interest in UFOs come from?
When I was a county police officer, a good number of years before I ended up at CIA, I we get calls now and then, like any police agency, and we had a 450 square mile jurisdiction, part of which was rural. So we would occasionally get cryptid calls and UFO calls and you name it, monster calls. And one time I was working the district that it happened to come out of. And so I went down, and it was in the southern part of our county. It was in a rural area. And this family, and it was a whole family, mom, dad, kids, and I think some other relatives were there. They swore this massive lit but silent object hovered above their home in their yard, and with all them staring at it. Wasn't there when I arrived, but they seemed, genuinely shook, and I took the report. And of course, the newspapers jumped all over it, but it went away eventually, like most of them do. That sparked it. That was my first, involvement with people that said, "Hey, I saw something and I can't explain it."
Were there other cases that you investigated as a police officer that involved UFOs? Or let's even go into other aspects of the paranormal, cryptids, for example.
I seem to recall, I don't think I responded on it. I recall, cryptid monster type calls that other units ran on. It was always, they'd go on scene and that'd be GOA, gone on arrival.
Right.
I was the lead officer on a paranormal case that literally scared the hell out of me. A family called and said that they thought there was some entity in their home, their home was haunted or something, and that furniture that was far too heavy for the babysitter who reported it to move on her own simply levitated and flipped around and was facing the wall the wrong way and so on. So when I got there was a massive dresser, and it was turned around facing the wall, and it highly unlikely that the little girl could have done that. Could there have been other humans there that weren't there when I got there that did it, and it was a prank, or it was, a hoax? Sure. But she seemed distraught. I took the report, and the report, they asked what could be done, and I said, well, we've got two choices. We can send it over to Ball State University to the paranormal studies program there.
Right.
Or we can send it down to the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, and the Catholic Church has exorcists. And I don't recall where we sent it. It may have been both. But there was enough put into the report by my superiors that it was sent, I believe.
Stand by, Phil. You and I have to take our first break. Thanks very much for taking time out of your day to join us over here, my friend. Always great seeing you.
You betcha.
Exonation, Phil Humphries is our special guest. You can find Phil on Facebook and LinkedIn. All you have to do is type in his name, and he'll pop up. When we come back, I want to ask Phil some questions about disclosure. Today's view on UFOs. Are we any closer to finding the truth? In fact, we had a guest on who told me yesterday, as a matter of fact, that disclosure will be happening on June 24th of this year. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, streaming us at classic1220.ca.
On the X-Zone Radio, where the truth finds a way through the stories of ghosts that wander and sway, inviting the seekers. From Newfoundland shores to the peaks so grand, we walk together united in this land. Every culture, every heart, a story to unfold. In this living tapestry, our pride is bold. With the wheat fields waving under skies so wide, we carry within us the Canadian pride. It's more than a passport, it's a bond, it's a song. To be Canadian, where we all belong. Oh, proud to be Canadian, Our spirits soar high with values that connect us like stars in the sky. We stand for...
And welcome back, everyone. Our guest this hour is Phil Humphries, and you can find Phil on Facebook or on LinkedIn. Phil, as a member, as a former member of the military, as a former police officer, and as a former member of the CIA, in your opinion, now this is just an opinion, would it be possible, or is it possible, that the governments could actually get away with suppressing the evidence that UFOs are real?
It would be a monumental task. And my experience with government is that they likely wouldn't be up to that sort of thing, especially over a long period of time. Let's just say from the 1930s and 40s forward. That's a long time to keep secrets, to keep every mouth shut. I don't know how you would do such a thing. I think the government would seriously try, especially if they would benefit from the technologies for weapon systems and for travel and what have you.
Right.
So would the defense industries, who would make billions of dollars off of that technology. But how you do that, I'm at a loss, because as a former cop too, people talk.
Yes, they do, yeah.
And I just don't know how you would accomplish that. You can't kill them all, because it'd be a trail of bodies. People would be reporting it.
That's right.
So how would you keep them from talking? And that's my biggest problem with this conspiracy thing about the government's had this stuff for ages.
That also goes to the same logic that applies to people who say, well, we never went to the moon. Now, if we didn't go to the moon, and if this was all done on a film set somewhere in the Nevada desert, how could something this big, this monumental, actually be contained and suppressed? I don't think it can be. I truly believe that we went to the moon. When I say we, I mean mankind. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Neil Armstrong on the show, Edgar Mitchell on the show, and I think that anybody who says, well, you know what, we didn't go to the moon, it's all a staged event. Well, haven't you seen Capricorn 1? That was based on the lunar missions. Yeah, okay. And you also believe in Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, and of course, let's not forget the leprechauns, right? It's amazing what people will believe and will not believe. There are still those who believe that JFK is in a room in the White House after the assassination, where he was severely mentally challenged. And of course, Elvis is dead. McCartney is dead. All these conspiracies, and from law enforcement, there are conspiracies, but I've never seen so many conspiracies as I have since I've been doing this show in 34 years.
Oh, I bet. And you said something one time on I think it was the first time I was on your show. You said everybody today has a perfectly good camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
A camera that not only has high def, but can upload immediately, because it's a smartphone, to the internet. Yet we don't have, visual proof of UFOs or Bigfoot or any of these other things. That to me is also a problem. Why isn't there anything?
I think that the acronym UFO, unidentified flying object, says it all. We don't know, or they don't know what it is. So it has to be something from outer space if we don't know what it is. And I really believe that when you take the time to investigate it, like many organizations do, including MUFON, they determine that, well, no, it was either a planet or a natural anomaly or unidentified aircraft. I remember when the stealth F-117 was doing its testing at the Area 51, people were calling up saying, oh, there's strange lights in the sky. It's doing amazing things. And this is, wow, well, haven't you heard of this? The testing of the F-117s? No. And where are the aliens that were captured or recovered from Roswell, New Mexico. Now, you're a former member of the military. I'm going to give you a scenario. You're the intelligence officer of the base in Roswell. Okay, you get the call to go out to Mark Brazel's ranch to see all this debris field. You, as a conscientious and intelligence officer, take some of the evidence back, put it in your vehicle, and you get in your vehicle, and where do you go?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have, like Marcel did, take it home to show his wife and kids and break the chain of custody.
Right.
I would take it, if I went anywhere, I'd go to the nearest phone, notify the base that I was coming with that, and then I'd take it straight there. There'd be no taking it to show family, friends, or whoever.
In my opinion, as soon as Marcel brought it to his family, that case is over. The chain of the custody of the evidence has been spoiled. Why do you think there's so much that is allowed to go unquestioned within the UFO industry? Did I say industry? That an industry makes money. Well, yeah, UFO business makes money. So, why do you think that people are willing to turn a blind eye?
I think that the government, in particular, would certainly like to turn a blind eye if it was something that was drawing attention away from their technologies and their classified programs. So it would be quite easy, instead of saying, oh, yeah, that's a piece of technology that we've developed in secret. It's easier and better to say, oh, no, we don't know what that must be, a UFO, something from outer space or interdimensional. So I think there would be motive for the government to cloak their projects with something that the public finds fascinating and is gullible enough to lap it up. As for the general public, they like anything that's odd and strange. Whether it's vampires or ghosts or cryptids or you name it, or things that, come from other dimensions or from outer space. It's intriguing and a little bit spooky to them. I mean, look what Orson Welles did with the radio program.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The public will buy a lot of things. So if you were an enterprising government and wanted to sell something to keep them from sticking their nose into your business, that would be a perfect vehicle for it.
Yeah, I wish I would have thought of that first. Do you think it's normal that you and I, because of our law enforcement military training, that we are more apt to being skeptical than a member of the general public when it comes to questioning and investigating what they perceive to be something paranormal?
Yeah, cops see things no one else sees. You see the very worst of humanity. You see things that you can't unsee, unsmell, unhear, and you become very skeptical of everything, in particular humanity. And so, it's just natural for us to be skeptics, to take maybe the adversarial viewpoint, because that's what you have to do sometimes to get to the truth of things out in the real world.
Sure.
And we're natural skeptics, and we tend to be negative and, see humanity maybe in a dimmer light than others do.
Mind you, I'm sure you'll agree with me that there were times when you were amazed by the wonderful beings that humans can be. I've seen many cases like that in my career, and it gives me hope.
Oh yeah. I mean, I rub shoulders with some of the finest humanity has managed to bring forth. Great people, and you're right. It does give you hope, because you see so much of the opposite of the bad stuff, the bad people. That when you see good people, it's a good thing for you.
One of the greatest moments of my career as a law enforcement officer was the day my partner and I delivered a baby.
Yeah. Bringing a life into the world.
That's right. Positive. And, after our shift, Terry and I went up to the hospital. But before we went to the hospital, we went to one of the toy stores in the Fairview Mall in Beaconsfield or Point Claire, Quebec, and we bought the biggest stuffed teddy bear that we could. And, we were, throughout time while I was in that district, it was Uncle Bob and Uncle Terry. And, it was great. Or the time that you went to a drowning and you were able to resuscitate, bring that person back to life, that made it all worthwhile.
It does. I understand completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a SWAT officer for a while, and it's I won't say easy, but you can teach people to kill, but to teach people to save a life, that's something there. That's real skill there, to save a life. Pretty easy to take a life.
Yeah.
Save one. It's not only admirable, it takes a lot of skill.
You and I have to take our next break, but when we come back, I'd like to talk to you about disclosure. There have been many congressional hearings on UFOs. Whistleblowers are coming out of the woodwork now.
They
And
are.
even President Trump is talking about opening up the UFO files. Is this real? Is he really going to do this? Well, time will tell.
Well,
Exonation, our guest this hour is Phil Humphries. And once again, Phil, thank you for your service, not only as a police officer, not only as a member of the military, but also as a member of the CIA. If you'd like to find out more about Phil, just go on to Facebook and LinkedIn and search for his name. PhilHumphries is his name, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break as the X-Zone continues from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. You can listen to all the programming that we produce here at the X-Zone at www.xzbn.net, and that includes Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Randall, Dr. David Gruder, Gwilda Wiaka, and many more. I'm Rob McConnell. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
A story to unfold in this living tapestry. Our pride is bold, with the wheat fields waving under skies so wide. We carry within us the Canadian pride. It's more than a passport, it's a bond, it's a song. To be Canadian, where we all belong. Oh, proud to be Canadian. Our spirits soar high, with values that connect us like stars in the sky.
Past midnight on Yates Street, the signal hums low. Static's alive and the shadows glow through the glass of the control room door. Something whispers, we've been here before. Old footsteps echo the real sighs. The red on air, light flickers and dies through the hallway. A chill creeps deep. CKTB never sleeps. Ghosts on Yates Street.
Phil Humphries is my guest, and Phil, what's your opinion on all this disclosure talk? We've got the congressional hearings that I watched and I fell asleep during a couple of times. You've got whistleblowers coming out talking about, well, things they can't talk about in the congressional hearing itself. They have to go into a private setting. So I figure, why did they come out in the first place if they can't talk about all this great information that they have? And I'm talking about David Gersh at this point. What's your opinion? Can a whistleblower be trusted?
Here's the cynical cop in me.
Okay.
It gets you lots of clicks if you're a politician, a congressman, to talk about UFOs, and you're going through these very highly classified meetings, and it makes you look like maybe you're somebody a little bit more important than what you are. I don't. That just me being a cynic. So I think that could be a motivation. As far as the government disclosing, for them to disclose something that's highly classified would take a lot of things to happen. Would require a lot of things to happen first. Now, the president, I suppose, can do that, but frankly, I don't know whether to trust them what they're going to disclose, or not. The only reason I could see a government, whether it's my government, your government, any government,
Sure.
disclosing something that they have kept secret for a long time would be that they know, for whatever reason, they're no longer able to do that, and we better come clean now and do damage control. So again, being the cynical ex-street cop, I look at it in those terms. What's in it for them, and why would they be doing this? It seems to me it could be a CYA.
Something that has always intrigued me and bothered me at the same time is that if Russia or China ever wanted to expose either the Canadian government, American government, or the government of the United Kingdom, or any member of NATO, let's put it that way, that they have been lying to their population and deceiving their citizens, would be to just hack into the appropriate data bank and release the files, the classified files on UFOs, saying that, all right, yes, Roswell did happen, here's the proof. This happened, here's the proof. That happened, here's the proof. Yes, the one lunar mission actually saw strange things above the moon. Here's the proof. And that would totally win them a separate digital war, but that hasn't happened yet.
No, it hasn't. I think that if there were to be a conspiracy that spans the globe, and a lot of governments, or most governments even, are involved in it, they'd be reticent to dime themselves out as well. I don't know. The way I look at things, and this is going to sound old-fashioned to many of your listeners and viewers, but because of my age category, my parents were greatest generation. My dad landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy during World War II. Just north of, or just up beach from him, the Canadian boys were landing, and the British. And our countries saved this planet.
Yeah.
So I tend to look at the UK, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand as the beacons of what the best humanity can bring. And so for me to think that they would lie to their populaces for so long, one, I don't, like we discussed, I don't know how you do that and get away with it without a leak.
Right.
But, we're the good guys. So why would we do such a thing? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down, but.
You're right. The olden days, no, I understand what my parents meant by the good old days. Things were much simpler back then, We would come home from school, we would do our homework on something called a notebook, using something called a pencil.
Yep.
Then we would have supper, and during supper we would talk about what we did during the day, how Mom's day was at work, how Dad was at work, and then we would do the dishes together, and then we would have dessert. And then if your homework was done, Mom or Dad would have to go into your notebook and sign that they saw your homework. And then, if it wasn't too late, you could actually go outside and sit with Dad on the balcony, or go play baseball in the backyard, or just go down to the river and do some fishing, but you had to be back home when the lights turned on. There was no such thing as handheld entertainment unless you were a young gentleman. And that was the only entertainment that you had with your hand way back then.
Yep.
Laura and I were at a restaurant a couple of years ago, and we were sitting there, and when we're together, we leave our cell phones in the car when we have our supper in a restaurant. But there was this table with a mom, dad, and about 4 kids, and they all had their cell phones out, and they were all using their cell phones, not talking to each other, not communicating.
Yeah.
What
It's a sad thing
Yeah,
to see.
it is. It is.
I grew up very similarly to how you did.
Yeah.
And human interaction is very important. If you lack it, if you lack the ability to communicate human to human, if you lack social skills, that lends itself to having a lack of empathy for your fellow man, which can lend itself to doing some horrendous things, which we've seen on this planet before.
Sure.
And so while I understand that technology will advance whether Phil likes it or not, we can't lose our humanity. And one of the things that we had a greater wealth of when we grew up was humanity and
That's right.
interaction with each other and socialization. You know, we went to movie theaters. We didn't watch things on huge flat screen TVs or on our phone.
And it was it was a big deal when you went to the theater, whether you're with your girlfriend or whether you were with a bunch of guys. After the theater, you'd go out to the local hamburger joint, hamburger and a milkshake, and then you went home. And it was yes, dad, no, dad, or And I've heard kids call their parents by their first names.
Yeah, that was unheard of when I was growing up.
I did an article 2 weeks ago for a number of newspapers, and it was all about this case where the lady, where this young girl brought Meta to court because of the addiction, and the entire premise of my story was, what are you doing? You're blaming technology for your inability to act as a responsible parent?
That's exactly what that was.
Don't you care about what your child is doing? Don't you monitor? Or are you too busy on your cell phone or on your tablet to actually care about what your child is doing? And for the schools to take the same attitude, like, whoa, slow down. You're there to teach. Right. And teaching starts when you walk in that door by respecting your teachers, Mr. and Mrs. When we went to school, Phil, we wore uniforms. For the guys, it was very simple. Gray trousers, white shirt, tie, black shoes. For the girls, they had a similar code. Nobody wore $300, $400, $500 sneakers to school. And we used to call our teachers Mr. Orr or Miss Brooks, not Leonard and Sheila.
Oh, no. That never would have flown. Like I said, the more you're involved with technology that isolates you from the rest of humanity, the worse it will be for society. It just doesn't develop the socialization that you need to be a responsible citizen.
That is so true.
Guys like you and me got to see that up close and personal, what happens when people, are not properly, socialized and civilized.
I use technology each and every day, hour upon hour upon hour upon hour. I use it. I don't abuse it. And it's just like gun owners. They can own a gun. That doesn't mean they have to go out shooting people or shooting at lights if they're responsible. Responsibility is a key factor in being a human being.
It is.
And
when I grew up in Indiana and was in high school, if you looked out in the high school parking lot, half or more of the pickup trucks had a rifle or shotgun across the rear window in the rack. There was never a school shooting. We never had a school shooting when I was growing up. There would be fist fights,
Sure.
And in some of the, hairier neighborhoods and larger municipalities, you might have some
Yeah.
knives in play. But school shootings, that wasn't part of the reality.
The first school shooting that I covered in the media was Columbine.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was it. I really didn't think that anyone would have to go through the pain and suffering that the parents and the children went through in that horrific crime. And yet, how many? Over 300 school shootings in the U.S. since that time?
Oh, yeah, it's every other day.
Yeah.
I flip on the news and, or see it on my phone, and there's been another, active shooter at some college or high school or what have you. Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Society is not the same as it was when we grew up.
it's not, but I have hope for the younger generation because of the people like yourself and myself. I like to think that I'm contributing something to the betterment of the world each and every day, whether it's as a former police officer, as a former, in your case, a former member of the military, CIA police officer. We all have had something that we have inside of us that we can contribute to make this a better world. Phil, stand by, my friend. We've got to take our final break. And Exo Nation, Phil and I will be back reminiscing. How do we get off of UFOs anyway?
I don't know. That was probably my fault.
No, I'll take the blame on this one. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, and on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. And don't forget, live if you're driving around Niagara or southern Ontario on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ.
Past midnight on Yates.
Some days I walk, some days I crawl, some days I can't feel much at all. My body's a maze that I try to read. Every step forward, a silent need. But I won't let this break who I am. I've learned how to fight, learned how to stand. I may fall, but still I rise. Through the pain, through the tears in my eyes. This road is long, but it's mine to tread. With every sunrise, I lift my head. I won't be defined by what I can't do. Still I rise, and I always will too.
Welcome back to the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Now, I keep on getting emails from listeners who are saying, Rob, where is St. Catharines? Well, St. Catharines is right on the shores of Lake Ontario. It's in between Toronto and Niagara Falls, Ontario, on the 401 going towards the U.S. And we're in a beautiful part of Canada, a lot of vineyards here. We've got tourism. That is one of our major industries. And I welcome anyone listening, no matter where you are. And if you're looking for a great place to visit, whether you're from Canada, whether you're from Quebec, whether you're from Manitoba, the United States, wherever, please come down and visit us here in Niagara. And I promise you won't regret it, and you'll want to come back, because not only do you come here as tourists, but you leave here as friends. Phil Humphries is my special guest, and if you'd like to find out more about Phil, just go on to Facebook or LinkedIn and type in his name, and poof, le voilà, he is there. Phil, we were talking about UFOs earlier this hour. I had a gentleman on the show last night, as a matter of fact. His name, John Knapp, and his website is galactic-guidance.com. And he was telling me that he channels extraterrestrials, and they told him, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that on June the 24th, 2026, there is a porthole opening up. A UFO will come through that portal that will be undeniable that they are real. And according to him, this is the beginning of disclosure. Now, we have this on tape, as the saying goes. I've had many other people on who've talked about the date and time of disclosure, and up until tonight, which is what, March the 31st, 2026, disclosure has not happened. Why do you think disclosure hasn't happened if, in fact, the ETs are there?
The only way that I can visualize something like that would be that if there were extraterrestrial forms of life that are in communication with us here on Earth, our
Right.
governments, they would probably have some agreements as to who gets to know and who doesn't. And if they were doing anything that we might object to, then they certainly wouldn't want, there to be disclosure of that. And frankly, the first thing I learned when I went to work for the government was you don't trust the government. So,
Especially if you're with the TSA and it's paycheck time.
Right. So, very right. How wrong is that?
Oh,
Anyway?
very wrong.
But so I just think that if our government, your government, whoever's government,
Let's just say the government
had the ability to obtain things that it wanted, they certainly would go to any lengths, depending on what those things were. And some of the things that they may have agreed to could be just egregious, beyond the pale. And of course, you wouldn't want to disclose that to a populace that might say, wait, you did what?
Yeah.
I look at it kind of darkly, I guess, but disclosure, it certainly will get you a lot of clicks if you're in the entertainment industry or in the media or in government. I don't know. There's always been that guy standing on the corner with the sign that says the end is near.
Oh my gosh. Remember those cartoons that you'd see?
Yeah.
Well, what we are doing is we're contacting affiliates in Canada, the United States, as well as in the United Kingdom that have live feed cameras. And we are going to be focusing on the skies. We also will be talking to different members of the ATC community, air traffic community. And we are going to be watching for that presence. And we'll see what happens.
That's a great thing. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Now, tell me, in your opinion, do you think that there's a possibility that the religious organizations could have something to do with the suppression of disclosure? That is, saying, well, no, the UFOs aren't real, ETs aren't real, because many think that if ETs were to be, come and pop up, and these little aliens would get out, that it would ruin theology as we know it. It would be the end of theology.
It might do some damage there, and yes, the structure of global religion is in fact a government and run by people who are politicians.
Yeah.
And besides having the clergy status, and I could see them being real nervous about something that might cast doubt on certain things that they've been saying over the centuries. Yeah, of course, that would have an impact. I go to church every week,
As do
a
I.
Catholic
Yeah.
church, and I'm sure the Vatican, as old as they are, knows one way or another, whether or not there's a likelihood that there are other life forms,
I would love to have access to the Vatican vault for one
Yep.
day, just for one day. Hell, if Tom Hanks can get it, why can't you and I?
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, to just think 2,000 years of
Jeez.
things are in there, Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing to wonder what would happen if there was no religion until today. And then all of a sudden, the wonders that are written about in the Bible started happening. Would we, with the knowledge that we have today, look at the events and report them as told in the Bible? Or would they be, yeah, so? A
We would
common day
explain them.
occurrence.
Yeah, we'd explain things with given our knowledge of current technology. I mean,
Yeah.
a burning bush would be, some device, a burning wheel of fire or what have you would be a UFO. I mean, yeah, we certainly would not explain it in the same
Yeah.
way that it was written in the Bible.
I can just hear this. Hey, Moses, the bush over there is burning. Don't worry about it. It was a wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, if you look at the way Moses was handed the Ten Commandments from Mount Sinai, that certainly has a UFO twist to it.
It does.
Yeah.
And, a lot of things, if you'd never seen a helicopter,
Right.
and all of a sudden the helicopter is hovering above you, there'd be a lot of things you might say and write about it that were way off base.
Yeah.
Because you simply didn't understand the technology you were looking at. And that likely would be the case way back in antiquity for someone, seeing something that they just had no framework to put it in. It would be totally paranormal to them.
It certainly would. And we've got about 2 minutes. My producer just whispered in my ear. I have to ask you, like I ask all guests of a certain age bracket, what do they talk about, or why do they say that the golden years are the best years? Well, first of all, what is gold about the golden years? This is something I just don't understand. And maybe you, because of your experience as a police officer, a member of the military, a member of the CIA, and of course, this falls into comedy, what we're talking about now. So why do they call them the golden years? I mean, besides the color of your urine turns into a solid gold color, what else could there be?
I certainly don't know because, if I sleep wrong, I'm half crippled. I can get out of.
Yeah.
I threw my back out once, leaning over the sink, brushing my teeth.
I did the same doing a grilled cheese.
Yeah. Aging is typically not very kind. It has a nasty demeanor sometimes, and
maybe it's called the golden years because you're getting ready to go through the golden gates.
That could easily be.
My God, we solved it.
We did. We should patent that concept.
I think we should. Phil, I want to thank you ever so much for coming on the show tonight. It's always a great pleasure talking to you. I wish you success in your stand-up comedian career. I'd love to be able to get to see you on stage one day. And thank you once again for your service.
And thank you, sir.
You
you served too as well.
I look forward to the next time you and I have the opportunity of chatting. In fact, I think I'll get you to come on with me on June the 24th when we do our disclosure special.
That would be great.
All right.
Just let me know, and I'll certainly be glad to do it.
I'm sure we'll be in touch before then. Take care of yourself, Phil. Regards to your family.
You too, sir.
Good night, Phil. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Phil, all you need to do is go to Facebook or LinkedIn and type in his name, PhilHumpries. That's Phil Humphries. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as the Exxon continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
I can't feel much at all. My body's a maze that I try to read. Every step forward, a sigh